Hails and welcome to Rauta's Reviews. Now this album came out already quite a few weeks ago. I got it late, go on a vacation, and there you have it. No album review coming out in time, but hope you will find this review video worthwhile. Anyway, it's time to talk about this British band called Memoriam and the third album Requiem for Mankind. Let's start unboxing and I will tell you a little bit both about the music and about the band. But first, let's just see this digitally release. As you can see, a very warlike image with ruins and fire, destruction, all that stuff. Not really surprising when you think of the history of the band. Now, it's hard to talk about Memoriam without mentioning Ball Thrower, and those of you who know the history of the band, you know already why, and those of you who don't know, I'm gonna mention why. First of all, we see a gentleman known as Carl Willets, vocalist. He used to be the vocalist of the famous death metal band from Britain, Ball Thrower. Then we have Frank Healy from other British death metal bands, Benediction at least. Then we have Andy Whale, yet again, old Ball Thrower member, playing the drums. And then we have the younger guy in the band, Scott Fairfax, who I think is mostly the reason why this album exists in terms of creating the music. Now they all have their parts in the band, and also they all have their meaning why this is kind of an old school yet also modern death metal album. It's very British, it's very Ball Throwerish, and yes, we're gonna talk a little bit about that also. So Ball Thrower call it quits when their old drummer died, rest in peace and all that stuff. But it's not Mr. Whale, by the way. But the thing is, Mr. Whale had been already left the band quite a few years before, and also Carl Willets had his moment of staying away from Ball Thrower, but then Ball Thrower kind of came back with Willets and all that stuff, made album blah blah blah, nicely gigs and all that stuff, and unfortunately the drummer dies, and basically that was a reason to call it quits with Ball Thrower. Sadly enough, one of my favorite death metal bands of all time, definitely. But that story was to be ended, and then things started to kind of stir up, and that's when Memoriam emerges. Now, half a Ball Thrower, half something else, it creates an interesting setup for this British band. But can it really be up to the level of Ball Thrower? Unfortunately not, even though there are lots of moments when Memoriam sounds so much like Ball Thrower's younger brother, and I think it's doing a really good job at it, because it's not so easy to really capture the feeling, the atmosphere, the kind of a Ball Thrower thing of being at war, being bombarded, being shot fires, being fired at, and all that stuff. I mean, Ball Thrower has a special meaning for me. That's why I'm talking about so much about it. Anyway, we're here to talk about Memoriam. So, is this album good or not? Now, I liked the first album back in the days. That's actually not too many years ago when it came out. I even liked the demos that came out, the Hellfire demos. So I had lots of expectations for the second album, which came out last year. And to be honest, it was a big disappointment. Kind of a mediocre album with only hints left of the first album. And I was like, okay, well, it's just one good album and then it's down sliding. Fortunately for me and the rest of the fans, I was wrong, because Requiem for Mankind is actually stepping up the game. It's like, okay, we did some mistakes with the second album and now we are making sure that this won't happen again. In fact, this third album is very much on the same level of the first one, even though I still think after a few listens that I like the first one more. But I think it usually takes years of digesting the ideas, the songs and whatever before I can actually make that call. But for the time being, I think the first one still is the Memoriam album. But this is not so much far away, you know. I think this is a very, very solid album because like everything actually falls in place. The songs, even the single riffs, the production, the vocals, which are classic Carl Willits, the drumming, which are of course classic Andy Whale, and kind of a feeling when it's not just ball thrower, but it's kind of a ball thrower like. And then there is this kind of a Scott Fairfax factor when he's creating those riffs. It's like flirting with ball thrower, but not going just full blown go there. It's not a clone band. When you have to understand it, and I think it's a good thing because as much a good ball thrower clone would make, you know, make me feel good and all that stuff, it really wouldn't make much sense. Rather, Memoriam is actually focusing on its own stuff. So it's kind of a, it's not hiding its, you know, being relative to ball thrower, like a kind of a part of the same family. But it's not the same guy. It's not the same guy with just new members and new name or whatever. But this is clearly for the same fans. It's slow-paced, classic death metal. It's not about this hyper blasting. It's not about being super technical, because this is kind of like a antithesis to those ideas. It's all about making riff-driven, kind of a badass death metal, which is kind of slow tempo, mid tempo. It's like a tank crossing the fields. It's coming close to you. It may be slow. It might be not too easy to hide, but it's coming there and it's pointing at, you know, you with its guns and the big ones and small ones and all that stuff. So it's kind of a death facing towards you, eventually coming closer, and then the big gun is saying boom, and you're just like, okay, this is a killer thing. So what I'm trying to say here is that even though Memoriam is not exactly surprising me in terms of the first album and the demos and the quality of all that stuff, it is delighting album in terms of, you know, making good, solid death metal. Much like the first album, and definitely not that mediocre stuff as with the first album. So it's a death metal album you should be checking out this summer. Why? Because all the reasons I already mentioned. So go spend your money, and if you don't have that money, go listen to them streams. And also worthwhile to mention, we have a interview video from 2 years ago from where they played in Helsinki, Finland. So go check out those Memoriam thoughts on the interview. And of course, if you have the chance, go see them live. They played a nice gig back then, also with some both cover songs, and I'm sure they still will kick some butt. So, with these words, thank you for watching, and see you soon with more Rauta reviews. Take care.